Well, let's move across to my special debate tonight. Is the FDI pause, reforms rollback? What impact is this going to have on UPA II? And of course, the irony, that our Prime Minister, the man who steered reforms 20 years ago under Narasimha Rao, is now the man who's had to press the pause button. Joining me tonight on that, Ashwini Kumar, Minister of State for Planning and Earth Sciences. I'm also joined by Rajiv Pratap Rudy, spokesperson of the BJP, Mani Shankar Iyer, Rajya Sabha MP and Congress leader. I'm also joined by Mohammed Salim of the CPIM and Mohandas Pai, formerly of Infosys. Thank you all very much for joining me. Mr. Ashwini Kumar, when a week is an eternity in politics, 20 years is history. So when we look at reforms, the man who steered us through it 20 years ago and today, do we now accept with FDI on indefinite pause that reforms now in the remaining years of UPA II seem to be on deep freeze as well?
Well, I'm certainly not as pessimistic as you, Sonia. I really don't think that there is cause for being so pessimistic. Yes, it is not a happy circumstance. This is probably a consequence of a fractured mandate. We do recognize that for any important policy initiative, we need a broad and a deep political consensus to sustain it. We will endeavor for that broadened political consensus, and we will continue to engage with our allies and indeed with all others in order to ensure that key policy initiatives and bills that are necessary to take the country forward get passed and get implemented. Of course, it is a political challenge. We understand that, and I'm sure with every experience we'll be wiser.
Mr. Rudy, can you come in here? Is the opposition claiming victory today? The irony, of course, the BJP has been under fire for abandoning its support to liberalization, many decisions taken under the NDA government, and seeming now to go backwards rather than forwards. Your view on what's actually happened today and the reforms process in India?
Well, it's a paradox where we in the country and many around us start saying that every change proposed is a reform, which actually may not be. And when you say that we are not against reforms, but per se we have to see what is best suited to the country. A country passing through a phase where it's a highest whopping inflation, food inflation, there is an overall inflation, the rupee is becoming weaker, there is a recession where there is a lot of speculation in the market, the Sensex is going down. The overall economic scenario looks to be so bleak. Here is a government which is not even sure what policy reforms it wants to bring. And possibly because this government is a suspect mainly because it was cornered off from many sides, whether it was corruption, price rise, and many more issues which we have been talking. Now, having said that, since it was clueless how to get out of it, it thought it's best to divert the attention. And the very fact that it has to go back on its own call of FDI proves a point that it was an uncalled action which did not find support also from its own allies. And if they had the numbers, if they had the support, if they had the courage, if they had the conviction, they would have gone through, but they have completely failed. So it proves a point that this government is clueless.
So you're saying it's an economic decision you didn't agree with, but that the government had the political courage and conviction and the numbers, most importantly, they should have gone through with it. Mani Shankar,
both.
Mani Shankar, let me bring you in here.
Both the ways.
Often as a conscientious dissenter, and I remember, in fact, I was reading a speech made by you in 2007 at CII when you said you were always a leftist and economic reforms made you a Marxist. You're somebody who's always been seen as one voice in the Congress against the whole brand of, well, Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh reforms. When you watch what's happening today, are you happy in a way that this whole process of reform being associated with change and good for India's growth story has been put on pause? Do you think we do need to rethink what's happening, and this whole outcry over FDI should make us sit and rethink what reform actually stands for today?
I hate to break your little heart, Sonia,
it's
but
a big
I would
heart,
like
Mr.
to
Iyer.
endorse on this program. I'd like to endorse on this program every single word that Ashwini Kumar has just said. But I want to add to that. I think this government has had to choose between governance and the continuation of democracy. Democracy is being derailed by the opposition, not over this issue, but over the last 13 months when they have prevented Parliament from functioning and therefore pushing us, since the presiding officers are unable to control the situation, they've been pushing us as the government, as the executive, in the direction of having to make compromises so as to allow Parliament to function and therefore for our democracy to not become dysfunctional.
NDTV's cricket app, Android and iPhone, fastest scorecard, special analysis, and much more. Download free. ndtv.com/apps.